All right, that was Martin Savage reporting. Okay, now that the prosecution rests, the defense will begin its case.
Sezen Oygar is a criminal defense attorney and a legal analyst, and she's joining us tonight to talk about the George Zimmerman case. And so far, based on what you have heard, the prosecution's case, what do you think have been the strongest parts of the prosecution's argument?
I think there's really two main things that have been strong for the prosecution, and to say that there's only two isn't a great thing for them. FDLE had an expert come out, and it was a firearm expert who she was able to go through, and one main point that I would be hitting over and over and over again if I were the prosecution is that George Zimmerman got out of his truck ready for confrontation, and we know this because he had a full magazine and a bullet in the chamber. Yeah. That goes directly to what is called the depraved mind element of second-degree murder. So that would be my number one thing. And if I was the prosecution, I'd be throwing around that gun. I would have that gun with me at all times, reminding the jury there was a bullet in that chamber when he got out of the car.
So are they not aggressive enough?
I think they're just clouding it. They're not hitting the points. Because there isn't that much direct evidence in this case, everything I think is getting clouded by the circumstantial evidence. You have one neighbor saying one thing, you've got one mom saying another thing. It's just getting mixed up. They really need to, I think, bring it back to the basics. Another one good point for the prosecution that, thank goodness, they were able to get out is one of the officers, Sereno, was able to testify that there was this depraved element. He confirmed, yes, in his opinion, what George Zimmerman did was consistent with profiling, and he showed ill will, hatred, and spite. And that was something that we saw from last week where we had Officer Smith get on the stand, and the defense, this was a state's witness, you have to remember that.
Right.
And the defense was able to pull him back and slash that testimony by saying, oh, no, I agree. George Zimmerman, when he brought him in, and remember, Officer Smith was the first responder, he had no evidence of ill will, hatred, or spite, which completely diminishes the second-degree murder charge.
Yeah, well, I don't want to pull you off point, counsel, but how strange, frankly, is it that one of the prosecution's witnesses, the medical examiner, testifies that he doesn't even remember performing the autopsy. And we've seen some indiscrepancies, and we've seen some strange moments already in this trial.
Right, it certainly was strange. To his credit, I'll give him a little bit because, you know, physicians, they do a lot of things, and it's not uncommon when you're deposing or when you're cross-examining a physician and they have to rely purely based off of their medical records. But with a high-profile case like this, and this only happened, you have to remember, just a year ago, right. You'd think that there'd be some recollection. That wasn't even the craziest part about his testimony. The fact that he changed his opinion on two different issues within, 60 days, and then I think it was 3 weeks before trial. Huge.
It just looks like the prosecution has lost control of its own witnesses.
They really have, and you have to give credit to Mark O'Mara and Don West, whether or not you like their style. Or, a lot of people aren't really liking Don West.
That's true.
But they really have done a great job in terms of diminishing the credibility of a majority of the prosecution's witnesses.
Now, a lot of us watch these crime and courtroom dramas, so we've heard some discussion about the DNA evidence in this case. How important is that?
In this case, it's important, but it really isn't truly important. So there's, blood splatters on Trayvon's clothing, which you would hope to find in a case like this to be able to prove, who was the aggressor and who was not, DNA under the fingernails. And it's suspicious that they weren't able to find any DNA on Trayvon Martin of George Zimmerman, and pretty much, vice versa. If there really was this brutal fight where George Zimmerman was truly in fear, in imminent fear of bodily harm, you'd think there would be some DNA.
Off camera, you kind of dismissed it. I thought it was telling that there was no Zimmerman DNA under Trayvon Martin's fingernails. And there was no Trayvon Martin DNA on Zimmerman's weapon.
Right.
But you don't think that was as big a deal as I think it was?
I don't think it is, because what the defense has done, and I think they did a great job, they were able to show that a lot of the DNA evidence was contaminated, specifically referring to the blood and the DNA that was found on, or that you would think would be found on Trayvon Martin. Unfortunately, the state, when they were packaging up all of the clothing and those materials, they put it in plastic baggies, zipped it up, which is the improper way, and it contaminated. When you've got to remember, you're in Florida, which is hot and humid, and even though this was in February, it basically started to mold, and it,
So they're saying, the court is saying that the evidence is contaminated, or the defense
is arguing that, and as for one reason as to why there isn't as much DNA. And it was a rainy day. They left the body from reports I've read, they left the body for a longer period of time than what is typically called for. But it is strange. It's one of those things you're just kind of like, what? You would think that there would be, if there really was this fight, you'd think that there would be some sort of evidence on Trayvon. And why doesn't he have any injuries? He only has one abrasion on his hand.
Okay. Sezen Oygar, legal analyst, thank you for that update on this
fascinating
trial.
stuff.
All of America is watching.
Thank you.
That's right.
All right.
Thanks.